I've always believed some things find you when you're ready. Not when you're prepared, not when it makes sense on paper, but when your soul is just raw enough to receive it. For me, that moment happened on a rainy Tuesday at a classic car auction just outside Detroit. I was standing under a leaking canopy, rain dripping off my cap, staring at this 1937 Cadillac like it had just breathed. Not the prettiest car on the lot, not by a long shot. The paint had long since surrendered to time, rust bloomed across the fenders like old bruises, and the front grille was bent like a sneer. But there was something, a presence, the kind of thing that doesn't shout but makes you lean in closer. I've been a mechanic for 16 years. Grew up under hoods with my dad back when we didn't have much, but knew how to fix what we did have. Since he passed, I've been saving, 20, 50 bucks at a time, stuffing it into a jar labeled The One. I didn't even know what that meant until I saw that Cadillac. Bidding started low, which gave me false hope. A few hands went up, old guys with deep pockets and vintage leather jackets. Collectors, investors, the kind of people who'd rip out its guts for parts or polish it until it forgot it ever had a past. I waited, watched. When the number hit $5,000, my stomach turned. That was over half my savings. At 6, I nearly walked. But when it stalled at 6,500 and no one else raised their hand, I felt something strange. Anger. This car deserved more than silence. So I raised my hand. The auctioneer's eyes snapped to me. 6,600, do I hear 70? Silence. A man in a blazer looked at me, then at the car, then shook his head. The gavel lifted. Sold! 6,600 to the gentleman in the back! That gavel hit like thunder. I couldn't tell if I was proud or panicked. I just emptied the jar, dipped into my emergency fund, and committed to a wreck that probably hadn't turned over since Eisenhower. I was in over my head. But as I approached the car, keys in hand, a weird calm settled in my chest. Like I hadn't just bought a broken-down machine, I'd just been chosen by it. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I had a reason to wake up early and stay up late. This wasn't just about fixing something. This was about honoring something.
The Cadillac sat in my garage like an artifact from another lifetime, proud, battered, and silent. I didn't start tearing it apart right away. I couldn't. Instead, I circled it. Every night after work, I'd just look. It was strange. I've restored cars before, but this one made me hesitate, like it deserved more than sockets and solvents. I found myself talking to it, out loud, like an old friend I hadn't seen in years. What happened to you? I'd whisper. Who let you go like this? My hands would brush over the hood, careful not to flake more paint. Every dent felt deliberate. Every scratch told me something, not about damage, but about survival. The smell inside hit me hard. Musty leather, old tobacco, and something else, like cedar and dust. That's when I started noticing things. The glove box didn't open. Not stuck. Sealed. The floorboards had patches, yes, but the bolts looked newer than the rest of the frame. And the front bench seat, it wouldn't budge. I'd restored seats rusted in place before. This was different, like someone wanted it shut. Still, I didn't jump to conclusions. This was an old car. Decades of weather, weight, and wear could explain it all. But I couldn't shake this feeling like I wasn't working alone. My dad used to say, "Cars carry memories, Danny, more than people think." At the time, I thought he meant oil stains and dented bumpers. But now I wasn't so sure. One night after a long shift at the shop, I came home dead tired. I told myself I'd just peek in the garage and go to bed. But an hour later, I was still out there with a flashlight, prying gently at the bench seat bolts, whispering like it might give me permission. Something was here. Not in the haunted way. I don't believe in ghosts. But in the human way. In the way old things remember being loved and lost. That night I made a choice. This wasn't going to be a quick fix and flip job. I was going to strip this car down to its soul, bolt by bolt. Not to make it shine, but to understand it. Because something told me no one ever really looked.
The day I went after the front bench, it was like wrestling with a ghost that didn't want to let go. I cleared out the interior first, brittle upholstery, cracked dash panels, old floor mats that crumbled in my hands. Everything came apart with the usual stubbornness of age. But the seat, that damn seat. It looked ordinary, dusty vinyl, some tears, nothing special. But the bolts holding it down fought like they were welded with grief. I sprayed them, let them soak, tried every trick I knew. Still nothing. And I swear, halfway through, I started getting this crawling feeling, like I wasn't just removing something, I was violating a boundary. I sliced my palm when the wrench slipped. Thin cut, stung like hell. Blood dotted the floor mat. I felt weirdly symbolic, like the card demanded a toll. But I didn't stop. Couldn't. The resistance only made me more certain. Someone had sealed this thing tight, not by accident, but with intention. I started looking for signs. Sure enough, 2 of the bolts weren't factory issue. They'd been swapped. The washers were newer, and one had been painted over. Someone didn't want this seat moved. 4 hours later, drenched in sweat, and with my jaw clenched so hard I gave myself a headache, I got the last bolt loose. I braced myself. When I pulled, the seat groaned. Then crack! It shifted like a breaking bone. Dust exploded upward. My flashlight trembled in my hand as I saw it. A gap. Just enough space to peer under. And under that seat was blackness. Not emptiness. Something. I lowered my hand inside. Fingers brushed leather. Not modern leather. This was aged, supple, almost warm. I felt stitching, zippers. My heart started pounding. I dragged it out slowly. A satchel. Dark brown, soft but firm, and heavy. My breath caught. Then, behind it, my fingers hit metal. Not part of the car. I reached in again and pulled out another satchel, flatter, harder. Both were sealed. For a long moment, I just sat there on the garage floor, greasy and bleeding, staring at them. Not because I was scared of what was inside, but because I already knew deep down this wasn't junk. This wasn't spare parts or tools. This was a story someone had tried to bury. And now, it was in my hands.
I didn't open them right away. The satchels sat on my workbench for 3 days, untouched. Every time I walked past them, I'd stop, stare, and then keep going. I told myself I was being respectful, but the truth was, I was scared. Not of what I'd find, but of what it might mean. On the 3rd night, I couldn't take it anymore. I cracked a beer, turned off the overheads, and let the work lamp cast its lonely glow over the bench. My garage had never felt quieter. The first satchel opened with a gentle squeak of old leather. Inside, letters, all stacked neatly and tied with fraying blue ribbon. The top one had a date, August 12th, 1932. They were written in looping, graceful cursive, from a man named Nathan Johnson to someone named Lydia. I read the first line out loud. If I don't write this now, I'll carry it like a stone in my chest. I stopped reading. Not because it hurt, but because it hit too close. Beneath the letters were black and white photos, carefully sleeved, a man in a crisp vest with a jeweler's loop in one eye, A woman in a long dress, smiling just slightly. 2 kids on a porch swing. This wasn't junk. This was a life. The second satchel was harder to open. The zipper had rusted shut. I used pliers, gently, and finally got it loose. Inside, jewelry, pocket watches, gold bands, rings with tiny etched initials. One had an engraving that said, "To Lydia, until the sky folds in." There were also receipts, yellowed slips from Johnson's fine jewelry on Gratiot Avenue, appraisals, custom orders, a folded floor plan of a store. My hands were shaking. This wasn't just a family's belongings. This was their entire history, tucked into the belly of a car and left a time. And that's when the question started drilling into my mind. Why hide this? What were they running from or protecting? Why seal it so tightly that it took me blood and hours just to get near it? I sat back and looked at the mess in front of me. Velvet pouches, faded photos, love letters, timepieces still set to decades-old hours. I felt like I'd broken into someone's heart. And now I had a choice. Put it back, pretend I never found it, or follow the thread. Because even though Nathan Johnson was a stranger to me, I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd been meant to find him, and maybe help him be remembered.
The next morning, I wrapped the satchels in an old blanket and placed them gently in the passenger seat of my truck. It felt wrong to leave them in the garage, like they might vanish if I turned my back. I didn't go to work that day. Instead, I drove to the downtown library, the kind that still smells like wood polish and yellowed paper. I didn't know what I was looking for, only that I couldn't pretend none of this happened. The librarian was in her 60s, wore big glasses, and had the kind of patience only people surrounded by silence seem to master. When I told her I was researching a man named Nathan Johnson, who owned a jewelry store in the 30s, she didn't blink. She just said, "Let's start with city directories." We pulled reels of microfilm from brittle drawers, hunched over old readers as the screen flickered through history. And there he was, Johnson's Fine Jewelry, listed in 1939. A tiny box ad with a phone number and a tagline, "Crafted with care, measured in time." I whispered it out loud. It gave me chills. From there, things got harder. The trail blurred. City records from the 1940s were sparse. Fire damage. World War II swallowed a lot of names. And Johnson is the kind of surname that disappears in a crowd. But I kept going. I scribbled down addresses, tax documents, newspaper mentions. The librarian brought me black and white copies of church bulletins, business licenses, and finally, after hours of dead ends, she found it. A death notice from 1967. Lydia Johnson, beloved mother of Samuel and Grace. It wasn't much. No photos, no detailed obituary. Just a whisper in a column. But it was enough. I leaned back in the chair, the words blurring as my eyes burned. Samuel and Grace. Children. Maybe still alive. Maybe not. But suddenly this wasn't about Nathan anymore. It was about what he left behind. And if even one person from that family was still out there, they deserved to know that their legacy, their love letters, their watches, their memories, had survived. It was buried under a car seat, yes. But now, it was breathing again.
The garage became something else after that. Not just a place to work. It became quiet in a different way, sacred almost. At night, I'd sit with the letters. I kept them stacked on a stool, opened one at a time, as if Nathan were reading them to me himself. He wrote about the Great Depression, about having to pawn his own wedding band to keep the store afloat, about Lydia's soft strength, how she hummed when she folded laundry, about fear of losing what he'd built, of being forgotten. Some of his words were beautiful, others were desperate, but all of them were human. The weirdest part was how often I felt like he was writing to me. Not literally, of course. I don't believe in signs from beyond, but the way he spoke, the way he fought to be seen, to be remembered, it hit something deep. Because for the past few years, I'd been feeling like I was drifting too. Fixing engines by day, eating frozen dinners by night. My phone barely rings. No one's really waiting on me. But now, this man from 90 years ago was whispering truths I'd never admitted out loud. And this car, the one I thought I bought from myself, was becoming a vessel for something bigger. One night, after tuning the carburetor and rewiring the dash, I sat in the driver's seat and looked around. I imagined Nathan there, Lydia beside him, maybe Samuel and Grace in the back, legs swinging. This wasn't just restoration anymore. It was stewardship, a kind of invisible handoff between two men who'd never meet, one who left something behind and one who was now holding it with both hands. That's when I made the decision. I wasn't going to sell the jewelry, wasn't going to keep the watches or the rings. I was going to find that family. And when I did, I was going to place their story back into their hands, because it didn't belong to me. And honestly, that's exactly why I felt so compelled to protect it.
It took 2 more weeks of dead-end calls, awkward messages, and one very patient church secretary before I finally found her. Angela. The woman on the phone sounded cautious when I said her name. I explained I was restoring an old car and had found something inside. I didn't go into detail, just asked if I could speak to her in person. There was a long pause. Then she said, quietly, "I'm home most days. If you're serious, you'll come." Her address was 30 minutes from mine. That drive felt longer than the highway could stretch. I had the satchels wrapped carefully in the same old blanket, resting on the passenger seat like sleeping passengers. When I pulled up, I saw a modest blue house with the cracked walkway and wind chimes whispering in the breeze. I almost turned around. Instead, I knocked. Angela opened the door slowly. She looked to be in her late 50s, with soft eyes and deep laugh lines. "I'm Daniel," I said, "from the car." She gave a short nod, then looked at the blanket in my arms. I didn't waste time. I placed the satchels on her coffee table and gently unwrapped them. "I found these under the seat of a 1937 Cadillac. I think they belonged to your grandfather." Angela didn't move for a moment. Then she sat, slowly, carefully, like she was sitting beside something sacred. I showed her the letters, the photographs, the pocket watch engraved "To Lydia." She picked it up with shaking hands and whispered, "My grandmother." Her eyes welled, but no tears fell, just a stillness that filled the room. "That's my father," she said, tapping a photo. "He was 5 in this. Samuel." She started to cry then, not loudly, just quiet, unstoppable tears. "My dad never talked much about his parents, said it hurt too much. We didn't know what happened to half their things. We thought everything was lost when their store burned." I told her how I found it, the sealed seat, the bolts, the fight it took to open it. She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "Thank you for not selling it.
Thank you for coming. We sat there for hours. She told me stories passed down in fragments. I filled in gaps with the letters. Piece by piece, a family took shape between us. Not just names, but lives. And in that moment, I realized something simple and heavy. What I returned to her wasn't treasure. It was memory. And sometimes, memory is the only thing that keeps love alive. The car looked nothing like it had when I first saw it under that leaking auction tent. The rust was gone, metal smoothed, primed, and painted in a deep navy so dark it looked black in shadow. The chrome sparkled, not like jewelry, but like armor. The bench seat, the one that hid a family's history, was reupholstered in soft gray leather, the original stitching pattern preserved by hand. Under the hood, she purred like she'd never stopped running. But what made the car complete wasn't the shine. It was the story it now carried with it, not hidden under bolts and vinyl, but told aloud, finally. Angela helped organize a small gathering, just family, close friends, a few people from her church. I parked the Cadillac in front of the community hall. The letters and photographs were displayed inside in shadow boxes, carefully arranged. Her nephew had even printed out some of Nathan's words on canvas. When it came time to speak, Angela looked at me. "You should be the one," she said. I stood in front of him, hands trembling slightly, and told him everything. About the auction, about the fight with the seat, about how the letters started to sound like my own thoughts. I told him the truth, that I'd bought a car thinking I needed a project, but it gave me something much more than work. It gave me purpose. When I finished, the room was silent. Then Angela stood, came over and wrapped her arms around me. "You didn't just restore a car. You restored a part of us we thought was gone forever." Then she did something I never expected. She pulled out the original set of Cadillac keys, the ones I had returned to her when we met, and she pressed them back into my palm. "You earned this. Keep her. Tell a story." I wanted to refuse. I did, but she wouldn't let go. So now, every Sunday, I take the Cadillac out. Not far, just around the neighborhood, down to the river. Sometimes I park near the old jewelry store's address, even though it's long gone. People stare, sure. They see the car. But I see something else. I see a man who loved his wife, a family who weathered fire and time, and the strange, quiet way life hands us what we need when we're just broken enough to receive it. This car didn't just carry metal and memories. It carried me back to myself.